sampling methods. In sampling methods, we discussed that there are two major types of sampling methods, that is probability sampling and non-probability sampling. The probability sampling is any method of sampling that utilizes some form of random selection. So this is the main characteristic of probability sampling that we have discussed yesterday. And in that probability sampling, there are different types like simple random sampling, systematic sample, stratified random sample, area sampling, cluster sampling. So we discussed till the area sampling yesterday, and today we will discuss about the cluster sampling. Cluster sampling, in this method we divide the entire population into groups. These groups are called as clusters. These groups which we prepare, these groups are called as clusters, and then we select some unit from these groups or the different clusters from a sample. So this cluster sampling, you will see that it is totally opposite to the stratified sampling. In stratified sampling, also we are preparing some groups. Do you remember what was the characteristic of stratified sampling? In stratified sampling, we discussed that we prepare stratas or the groups, but these groups are homogeneous in nature. We identify similar characteristic of people or the individuals, and we prepare groups of these similar individuals. These groups are called as stratas, and then we choose sample from these stratas. However, in cluster sampling, it is totally opposite to this cluster sampling. Why? Because the units within each cluster will be heterogeneous. In stratified sampling, we saw that the groups which we are preparing, those were homogeneous in nature. But here in cluster sampling, the groups are heterogeneous in nature. Heterogeneous means anybody? Heterogeneous.
Different.
So that means heterogeneous means they have different characteristics or they are not similar. So in cluster sampling, we will see that whatever groups we are making, we call it as a cluster, and these clusters are heterogeneous in nature. And there should be small difference between the clusters. And between the clusters, there will be small difference. But within the cluster, they will be heterogeneous. Between the clusters, two different clusters may be relatively similar. However, within the cluster, we will see that all the individuals will be dissimilar or they will be heterogeneous. We will see one diagram so that you will be more clear about this. Is this diagram visible to you all?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So in this diagram, you can see that this population we have divided into different groups. We are calling it as a clusters. Here we have divided this population into 6 different groups. So by looking into these clusters, you will see that all these clusters are looking similar between the clusters. Two different clusters, if we take, they may look similar. However, within the cluster, they will be dissimilar. There will be difference or dissimilarities within the cluster. Within the group, the individuals or the respondents will be different. However, collectively, if we see, all the clusters will look like similar. will be homogeneous. So between the clusters they will be homogeneous, but within the cluster they will be dissimilar. Are you getting this?
Yes, sir.
So from these clusters we select the sample groups. Like here in this example we have taken this first cluster and this cluster as a sample. Then they will be surveyed, or then they will be studied for the further research. So earlier what we before this method we saw area sampling. So this area sampling is a version of the cluster sampling only. So here for this cluster sampling we take one example. Like for example, if a market research team or a researcher is attempting to study the preference of TV brands in a large city. So the researcher wants to study the preference of respondents or preference of people for a TV brand in the large city. So what he will do is he will divide the entire city into different clusters. These clusters will be homogeneous between themselves, but they will be dissimilar within the group. There will be dissimilarity within the group. So these clusters he will select, and then he will conduct the study or survey for understanding the preference of TV brand in that particular city. So for this study he will divide this city into different clusters, different areas, and from these different areas he will select few areas for study of the TV brands in that particular city. Have you understood this example?
Yes, sir.
So areas, we'll again come back to the area sampling which we have discussed earlier. So this area sampling is a primary application of cluster sampling. So this cluster sampling will be called as area sampling, where the clusters are countries, township, city blocks, or other well-defined geographical sections of population. So in cluster sampling, when the population we are taking is based on the different countries, townships, city blocks, we can call it as a area sampling only. So under this sampling, under this area sampling, which is the application of cluster sampling, what we do is we divide the total area into smaller non-overlapping areas, generally called as geographical clusters. So we divide the entire geographical area into different uh, smaller areas. We call it as geographical clusters, and from these clusters, the sample will be chosen. Then certain areas are randomly selected, and all households in the selected area would be interviewed to get this information. So first of all, we select one geographical area, we divide that geographical area into smaller areas, and from these different clusters, we select few clusters randomly, and then we interview or we collect information from all those households or all those individuals from that particular area or that particular clusters. So is it clear to you all? Any query in this? Any query in cluster sampling? Pallavi, Akshay, Omkar, do you have any query in cluster sampling and area sampling? Omkar, Yogesh, Sagar, Pallavi?
No, sir.
Hmm. So we'll go ahead. and we'll start discussing the another major type of sampling methods, that is non-probability sampling. So whatever methods we have discussed till now, all were probability sampling methods. Like we have discussed the simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified random sampling, area sampling, and cluster sampling. All these are the type of probability sampling we have discussed. Now we'll go ahead and discuss the another type of sampling methods, that is the non-probability sampling. So the non-probability sampling means it is a process of selecting sample from a population without using statistical probability theory. So here this probability non-probability sampling methods will not be based on probability theories. So without having a probability theory, that is random characteristic of randomness will not be there. So here the probability of getting selected will not be equal for every individual. The probability of getting selected will not be equal. Therefore this type of sampling methods will be called as non-probability sampling methods. So here, as we have discussed, each element or member of the population does not have an equal chance of being selected in the sample. So every member of the population will not have an equal chance of being included in the sample. So as it was in probability sampling, that every respondent will have equal chance of getting selected. So here in non-probability sampling, you will see that that characteristic is absent. Here in non-probability sampling, each element or member of the population will not have equal chance of being included in the sample. And also the researcher will not be able to estimate the error which is caused by not collecting the data from the elements or the members of the population. So here researcher, it is also difficult for the researcher to estimate the error caused by non collecting the data from all elements or members of the population. So what is the error which is causing because of dissimilarity between the sample which we are choosing and the total population? That some error is difficult to measure. Then few advantages what we can have because of using this non-probability sampling methods. The first advantage is that in this technique the sampling process is easy. So you will see that all these methods, these are easy to carry out, these are quicker, less consuming less time, and these are cheaper. Thereafter, once we use it, the randomization is impossible, like when population is almost limitless. So primarily these methods are useful when the population is limitless. So when we do not know the exact population of the particular particular individuals or particular respondents for particular survey, so we can use this type of non-probability samples. For example, if you are studying students of university, so having the exact number of students of university is difficult. Also the number of students will be more, so that it is difficult to calculate sample size for that particular population. So when the population is limitless or it is more, then this type of methods of non-randomization, that is non-probability sampling, can be used. And another advantage what we can, or another aspect of this non-probability sampling which we can see is the researcher here does not aim to generate results that will be used to create generalization pertaining to the entire population. When a researcher aim is not to generalize the particular results of the that particular survey or that particular research to the entire population, then this type of non-probability sampling methods can be used. Generalized means applying those results to the population. So if the aim is not to apply this findings or results to the entire population, then this type of methods of non-probability can be used by the researcher. Is it clear now till now?
Yes.
So these are the types of non-probability sampling which we are going to study. Convenience sampling, then quota sampling, purposive sampling, and snowball sampling. So these are the four different types of non-probability sampling which we'll be discussing. So this first type of non-probability sampling is called as convenience sampling. So convenience sampling by its name itself, it suggests that it is as per the convenience of the researcher. So this method is probably based on selecting the easily accessible participants with no randomization. So without any random selection, we try to include this individuals or respondents who are easily accessible and convenient. Therefore, the name convenience sampling is there. Example you can take is just some time back we discussed that there may be n number of students of a university. So university may have more than 10,000 students. The exact number may not be available or difficult to calculate. So if we have more than this type of large number of students, and if probably if we are interested only to take sample size of almost 100 students, so what we can do in this situation is we may simply stand to the main entrance where it will be easy or convenient for us to invite the students who are passing by through the entrance. So it will be very, very easy for the researcher to include those respondents to his study. It will be convenient. So those who are passing through this entrance will be collecting those responses of those students only till we get the sample size of 100. So this is a convenience sampling. In convenience sampling, simply we select those participants who are easily accessible. So in this example, the researcher may stand probably into the entrance of that university, and then those who are passing by, he will select the sample of the students till he reach the number 100. Therefore, this sampling method can be called as a convenience sampling. So in this convenience sampling, as you see, the sampling strategy is selecting the cases based on their availability for the study. Those participants or those respondents who are easily accessible and available for the study, those will be selected for this type of convenience sampling. The main purpose of this convenience sampling will be to save the time, money, and efforts. So the advantage of this method is that it saves time, money, and efforts of the researcher, because he is not going to the different participants. However, he is taking a position, or he is standing at a particular place, and he is collecting the responses of the people who are easily accessible or who are available. Another example you can take, a researcher maybe probably if he wants to study the satisfaction level of people who are visiting a mall. So he may simply stand at the entrance of that mall, and he will collect the responses who are passing by, or those people or those customers who are easily available at the entrance of that particular mall. So that is a method wherein the researcher is contacting the people who are easily accessible and available. That type of method can be called as a convenient sampling method. The another method in this non-probability sampling is quota sampling. So quota sampling, in this quota sampling, this participants are selected in numbers proportionate to their numbers in the larger population. So we see the population of different participants on based on their different characteristic, what is their number in the total population, and then appropriate proportion of sample we select from that particular population. We call it as a quota sampling. So in this sampling also we do not use randomization technique. So samples are not selected on random. However, we select number of people to be surveyed or to be studied from a particular population based on the different characteristic and the proportion of those people into that particular population. So we'll take one example so that you will be more clear about this quota sampling. So the number of students in the same example, the number of students from each group that would include into the sample would be based on the proportion of male and female. For example, we have identified the main characteristic of that population is the gender, and based on the gender we want to fix the quota of particular students to be selected from that particular population of that students. So we have selected this criteria male and female, and we saw that the proportion is 50-50 or 60-40. So in the same proportion, we will divide or we'll select the sample from that population. Maybe if we want to select 100 students, so we will select 60 male students and 40 female students based on their proportion in the population. Are you getting this quota sampling? Are you understanding or you want me to repeat it once more? You guys,
Yes, sir.
shall I repeat?
Yes, sir.
So in quota sampling, what we do is
Yes, sir.
quota sampling we fix the number of people to be selected from a population based on some major characteristic of that population and proportion of those type of individuals in that particular population. For example, if we take this example of university students, and if we want to select 100 students, so we have selected the characteristic like male, female, gender. So based on the gender, there may be the proportion of male and female as 60-40. So based on the proportion of male and female in the population of the students, 60-40, 60 male, 40 females. So we'll select 60% student, that is if we want to select 100 students, then we'll select 60 male students and 40 female students. Now is it understood?
Yes, sir.
So this quota sampling, as we see, the main strategy of sampling the respondents in quota sampling is select the sample that yields same proportion as the population proportions on easily identified variables. So the gender may be easily identified variable. So based on the gender, we'll see how much proportion is there in the population. How many males are there? How many females are there? So based on this easily identified variable, we select a sample size from particular, or we can say quota of sample from that particular population. So if we want to select 100 students, so based on that gender, we'll select those many male or those many female based on their proportion in the population. And the purpose of this method is that taking a set number of cases from each subgroup to raise analytical confidence and representativeness. So with this quota sampling, what we do is the main purpose is to take set number of cases, the quota of particular cases or individuals from each subgroup to raise the analytical confidence, to raise the accuracy and representativeness of that particular sample to the population. So going ahead, another method of non-probability sample is purposive sampling. This purposive sampling, or which is also called as a judgmental sampling. In this method, the this purposive or judgmental sampling reflects a group of sampling techniques that rely on judgment of the researcher. So here, the sample is selected based on the judgment of the researcher when it comes to selecting the units that are to be studied. So when a researcher want to study certain population, and if he uses his judgment of selecting this particular sample, so if he is intending to study particular population for particular research, he may select the sample from that population based on his judgment, his experience about the samples, about the units in the sample in the particular population, which he feels that are more informative. He will select those individuals as a sample. So this method, which is based on the judgment of the researcher, is called as purposive sampling. Example may be specific people, specific cases, organizations, specific events, specific pieces of data. So in a particular research, for example, if a researcher wants to study the effectiveness of particular advertising campaign, so he may select few retailers which he may feel that those are more informative, or those who are more active, or who may give correct information. So based on his judgment or experience, he may select few retailers from the total population of retailers, and he will take the information from those retailers related to particular advertising campaign, how it is effective, is it effective in getting the more sale. So this type of sampling, wherein the researcher uses his own judgment for selecting the individuals or selecting the units in a particular sample, that method is called as judgmental sampling, and this sampling is also called as purposive sampling. Why? Because purposefully the researcher is selecting few units from the particular population for the further study, and therefore this method is called as purposive or judgmental sampling. In purposive or judgmental sampling, you will see that the strategy of selecting the sample is based on the judgment of the researcher, and he will select all these cases that meet some criteria. So as per his judgment, he may decide particular criteria, and those units or those cases or those individuals which fit into his criteria, he will select those individuals for the further study. And this method will be useful, or the purpose of this method is it is useful for quality assurance. So the researcher will be assured of the quality of the research, because he has selected those units from the population which he thinks that those are more informative, or those can provide quality information. Is the this method understood to you all? This method of purposive or judgmental sampling. Is this method understood? Is there any query related to this technique?
No, sir.
No, sir.
So we'll go ahead and we'll discuss the another method of sampling technique in non-probability sampling, that is called as a snowball sampling. Are you able to see this picture? Are you
Yes, sir.
there? Yogesh, Nikita, are you able to see this picture?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
What is this picture?
Yes, sir.
What is this picture?
A piece of ice.
Correct. So it is a snowball, and the characteristic of snowball is that as the snowball starts rolling, it will increase in the size, isn't it? As it starts rolling from one place to another place, the size of that snowball will start increasing, and that is the basic concept behind this snowball sampling. So in the snowball sampling, you will see that this method is based on selecting the participants by finding one or two participants and then asking them to refer you to the others. So in some cases, when a researcher wants to conduct a study and he is not aware of the particular population, if the study is based on unknown population, then the researcher make use of this type of snowball sampling. We'll take one example. If a researcher is doing a study on population or on individuals who are migrated from other states in Pune city, so the population of those people who have migrated from other states to Pune city is unknown. It is not known. So what he will do is he will contact one or two known people which he finds, and then he will go on asking the contact details of other people who have migrated from other states to Pune city. So as he starts his survey, he will start finding the contact details of other people who have migrated from other states to Pune city, and he will go on including all those individuals as he is going ahead. So whatever contact details he is getting from other these people who he is contacting, so the snowball will increase in size. So the sample will go on increasing. So as he is going on and contacting people, he will find more people, and those people will be included in the study, so that the sample will increase, or the people he is contacting, the more number of participants can be included in the study. We'll see this diagram. So in this snowball sampling, first if we find one person having a particular characteristic which we want to study for a particular research, maybe we have taken the example that the researcher is intending to study the people who have migrated from other states to Pune city. So he may find one person who has migrated from other state to Pune city. He will ask the contact details of other people who have migrated like him. So he may get two people. So after surveying or taking information from one person, he will contact these two people whose contacts he has got from the first person. Then after contacting these two people, he will get more contacts, more people, which also can be included into the study. So after contacting this one person, he has got these three people. After contacting this person, he has got more three people, contact of more three people. And after contacting these three peoples, or these three individuals, he has got few more references, which also he can include in his study. So that is called as a snowball sampling. This snowball sampling can also be called as a chain referral sampling. This snowball sampling can be also called as a chain referral sampling, as the researcher is contacting one person and the chain will start. The one person will give contact of other person, that person will give contacts of two more people or three more people, those three people will give the researcher more contacts, so the chain will start. So this method, snowball sampling, can also be called as a chain referral sampling. And sample have traits that are rare to find. So as I discussed, in a particular study where the researcher is doing research on a particular characteristics which are very rare to find, or those people, the population is not known, that time this type of snowball sampling can be used. So existing subjects provide referrals to recruit people or samples required for the particular research study. So here the researcher, as I said, will contact few people, initial subjects or initial individuals, and those people will give references, and those references of other people can also be included as the research subjects in that particular study. One more example we can see here, meeting a homeless person. So the population of homeless people is not known, so it is a rare characteristic. And if a researcher is intending to conduct a study which is based on homeless people, so then this technique of snowball sampling can be used. So he may interview one person which he finds, and then he can take the references from that one person, so that he can contact other people which are similar to that people, similar to that person. So in this snowball sampling, you will see that the strategy is the group members identified additional members to be included in the sample. So the initial group or initial individuals which the researcher finds, so that group members will identify additional members to be selected or included in that particular research study. Purpose is, this method identifies cases of interest to people who know what cases are information rich. So the initial subjects or initial individuals will give the contacts to the researcher whom they know, or who know that some individuals who have better information or information rich, those samples or those individuals can be further included in the study. So this sampling method, wherein the researcher go on including the sample as he is contacting the different respondents and taking the contact details of other individuals similar to him, where the population is not known and the population is based on certain rare characteristics, that type of sampling method is called as snowball sampling. Is this method understood to you?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Any queries till now, whatever we have discussed?